You know what's mad? Right now, beneath your feet, there are billions of worms doing their thing in the soil. Tiny little creatures most of us find a bit grim, but 500 million years ago, worms ruled the world. And I'm not talking about garden variety earthworms, I'm talking about foot-long terror beasts with massive jaws that could swallow you whole. Well, if you were a shrimp back then. Scientists just dug up something absolutely mental in the frozen wastes of northern Greenland. They found these enormous predatory worms from 518 million years ago, and they've given them a proper villain name, Timorebestia. That's Latin for terror beasts. And before you roll your eyes thinking scientists are being dramatic, wait until you hear what these things were like. Here's what's going to blow your mind in the next few minutes. First, these worms were the sharks of their day, except sharks didn't even exist yet. They wouldn't show up for another 100 million years. Second, one of these fossils died mid-meal with its lunch still stuck in its throat. And third, if these things were still around today, swimming in our oceans at their original size, they'd be absolutely terrifying. But here's the twist. Their descendants are still with us, and they're tiny. Evolution's funny like that. So picture this, it's 518 million years ago. Earth looks nothing like it does now. No plants on land, no animals either. The continents are all jumbled up in weird positions, but the oceans are having an absolute party. This is the Cambrian explosion, when life went from simple blob-like things to complex creatures with eyes, shells, and proper body plans. It's like nature suddenly discovered how to build with Lego. Now, everyone thought the top predators back then were these weird arthropods, distant relatives of crabs and lobsters. Some of them looked proper alien, with 5 eyes and a trunk-like grabbing arm. But turns out, while everyone was looking at these armoured weirdos, the real killers were gliding through the water column above them. Enter Timorebestia. Imagine a worm the length of a ruler. That's 30 centimeters for those keeping track. Doesn't sound massive, does it? But remember, most animals back then were smaller than your fingernail. This thing was basically a sea monster. It had fins running down both sides of its body like some sort of prehistoric ribbon. Long antennae sprouted from its head, probably sensing vibrations in the water. But the really scary bit, the jaws. These weren't like any worm jaws you've seen. We're talking about massive, crushing structures inside their heads. Not little bristles or hooks, proper jaws that could grab and munch through the toughest shells of the time. The scientists who found them reckon Timorebestia was one of the most formidable predators in the ocean.
Here's where it gets proper interesting. When the researchers cracked open these fossils, they found something extraordinary. Inside the digestive systems of multiple specimens, they discovered the remains of their last meals. Little arthropods called isoxis, which were basically the chicken nuggets of the Cambrian seas. These isoxis had long defensive spines sticking out front and back, like built-in toothpicks to stop predators swallowing them. Fat lot of good it did them. One fossil, and this is brilliant, actually died with an isoxis still stuck in its jaws. Imagine that! This terror beast was in the middle of scarfing down its lunch when something killed it. Boom! Frozen in time for 500 million years with food literally in its mouth. That's like finding a fossilized human with a half-eaten sandwich. The place where they found these monsters is mental too. Sirius Passet in Greenland, about 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole, proper Arctic wasteland. The scientists can only work there 6 weeks a year because the rest of the time it's basically Hoth from Star Wars. But this site is extraordinary. One researcher said every time you split a rock, you find dozens or even hundreds of soft-bodied fossils. It's like nature's own prehistoric library, perfectly preserved in stone. What makes these terror beasts special isn't just their size or their jaws, it's what they tell us about how life evolved. See, Timorebestia are related to modern arrowworms, tiny predators that float around in today's oceans eating microscopic prey. But while modern arrowworms have external bristles for catching food, Timorebestia had internal jaws. It's like comparing a Venus flytrap to a proper mouth with teeth. The scientists used this fancy technique with an electron probe to map out the carbon in the fossils. Sounds boring, but it revealed incredible detail: muscle fibers, nervous systems, even the fin rays. They could see this thing had a massive nerve cluster in its belly called a ventral ganglion, which helped it sense vibrations and coordinate those ribbon-like fins. This wasn't some primitive wiggler. This was a sophisticated killing machine. Here's what's absolutely bonkers. These terror beasts probably ruled the oceans for 10 to 15 million years before arthropods took over. That's longer than humans have existed in any form. They were the apex predators, the white sharks of their era, except there were no fish yet, no sharks, no whales, just these ribbon-finned nightmares gliding through ancient seas. Can you imagine diving in those waters? The visibility would be decent because there's no mud from land plants yet. They don't exist. You'd see these foot-long worms undulating through the water column, those long antennae twitching, searching for prey. Below them, the seafloor crawls with trilobites and other armoured creatures. Above, more Timorebestia patrol like prehistoric submarines. And everywhere, clouds of tiny ice oxes trying desperately not to become lunch.
The researchers reckon Timorebestia occupied the same ecological niche as modern marine predators. In today's oceans, that role belongs to sharks, seals, and killer whales. Back then, it was giant worms with internal jaws. Mental. What happened to them? Well, that's the million-pound question. Somehow, after ruling the seas for millions of years, they vanished. Maybe the arthropods got better at defending themselves. Maybe something else evolved that was even scarier. Or maybe the oceans changed in ways that favoured different predators. Whatever happened, the age of terror beasts ended, and their tiny descendants were all that remained. But here's a thought that'll keep you up at night. We've only scratched the surface of what lived in those ancient oceans. Sirius Passet is just one site, albeit an incredible one. What other monsters are waiting in the rocks? What if Timorebestia wasn't even the biggest predator of its time? What if there were 2-foot versions or 3-foot versions lurking in deeper waters? And here's the real kicker. Soft-bodied animals hardly ever fossilize. We only know about Timorebestia because of the exceptional conditions at Sirius Passet. For every terror beast we find, there might be 100 other species that vanished without a trace. The Cambrian oceans could have been full of nightmares we'll never know about. Modern arrowworms are still pretty fierce for their size. They're transparent, which is creepy enough, and they can dart through the water to snatch prey with those external bristles. Some species are even bioluminescent, but at just a few centimeters long, they're hardly terror-inducing. It's like evolution took this massive predator and shrunk it down to pocket size. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? In 500 million years, what will future scientists think of our apex predators? Will they dig up a great white shark and marvel at these ancient terror fish? Will they wonder how killer whales ruled the oceans with their primitive echolocation? The truth is, every era has its monsters. The Cambrian had Timorebestia. The Mesozoic had marine reptiles like mosasaurs. We've got our own oceanic predators. But there's something primally terrifying about giant predatory worms. Maybe it's because worms seem so primitive, so basic. The idea that they once ruled the seas challenges our whole notion of what makes a proper predator.
Next time you see a little worm in your garden, remember its ancient cousins. Remember that for millions of years, worms weren't the early bird's breakfast. They were the ones doing the eating. They were the terror beasts, the ribbon-finned hunters, the jawed nightmares of the Cambrian seas. So here's my question for you. If you could bring back one extinct creature, would you choose something famous like a mammoth or a dodo? Or would you go for something properly mental like Timorebestia? Imagine keeping a foot-long terror beast in an aquarium. What would you even feed it? Let me know in the comments what extinct creature you'd resurrect if you could. And if you enjoyed this dive into prehistoric nightmares, you know what to do.